All right, everybody, welcome back. Today, we're tackling a career path that you might not have thought much about before, um, spring making. We're doing a deep dive into what it really takes to break into this field, what the work is actually like day to day, and the maybe surprising skills you need to succeed.
And I think most of us don't realize just how crucial springs are. They really are everywhere. Cars, smartphones, airplanes, you name it, there's probably a spring involved somewhere.
I've got to admit, I was a little clueless too. Like, yeah, I knew springs were common, but I never stopped to think about the people who actually make them. So to help us on this deep dive, we're looking at excerpts from RoleCatcher's career guide on becoming a spring maker. They even have some interesting resources on their website, so we'll be taking a peek at those too. So from what I'm gathering, this isn't just some niche job market.
Definitely not. The guide actually talks about a pretty impressive demand for skilled spring makers.
Correct.
Just think about all those different industries, all those products that rely on springs. That translates to a whole lot of job security, which is something a lot of folks are looking for.
Okay, now I'm really interested.
Yeah.
But what exactly does a spring maker do all day?
All right, picture this. You walk into a workshop, it's buzzing with activity, machines are whirring, maybe a little bit of sparks flying. It's kind of like a symphony of metal in motion. And you, as the spring maker, you're the conductor. You're running a whole orchestra of specialized equipment. Spring coilers, grinders, testers, you name it.
It's like working on a giant, intricate puzzle, but with heavy machinery.
Yeah.
So you need some real skill to work these machines. This isn't just some automated thing.
No, you're definitely right about that. It's not just pushing buttons. Remember those tiny, and I mean tiny, springs inside your phone? We're talking about incredibly precise work. Even a thousandth of an inch off can ruin the whole thing. The guide calls these tolerances. Meeting those strict quality standards, that's where the real skill comes in.
Well, yeah. I can see why attention to detail is essential here. One tiny mistake and you could end up with a wonky spring. But let's be realistic, things don't always go perfectly. The guide also mentions troubleshooting. What happens when these machines decide to have a mind of their own?
Well, that's when things get really interesting. A good spring maker, they need to be a bit of a detective. Identifying the problem, thinking on your feet, coming up with solutions on the fly, that's all part of the job. It's more than just operating machines. It's about making sure everything runs smoothly.
Okay, it sounds kind of exciting, actually. But let's be honest. Working in a manufacturing environment can't be all sunshine and roses.
Yeah.
I'm picturing noise, maybe a bit of grime. Definitely not a day at the spa, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. The guide is pretty upfront about the work environment. It's manufacturing, so there's going to be some level of noise and dust. Oh, and probably some heavy lifting, too, so you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Safety gear is definitely a must-have. Can't forget about that.
So you definitely need more than just a steady hand to make it in this field. What about the actual skills, though? What does the guide say about the kind of aptitude you need to be a successful spring maker?
Well, having a knack for mechanics is kind of a given, right? You are working with these complex machines all day long, but it's more than just operating the equipment. It's about understanding how it all works, the mechanics, the maintenance, the ins and outs.
Yeah, that makes sense. The better you understand the machines, the quicker you can troubleshoot if something goes wrong, right?
Exactly. And here's something I bet you didn't expect. The guide also stresses the importance of math skills.
Wait, really? Math? For springs. My high school algebra teacher is probably laughing at me right now. She always said it would be useful in real life, but I never really believed her.
Well, believe it or not, those equations actually do come in handy in the world of spring making. The guide talks about using math to solve practical problems on the job.
Think about it. You need to calculate dimensions, make sure those tolerances are absolutely perfect, and you've got to adjust machine settings based on the type of metal you're using and its properties. It's all connected.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's definitely more complex than I initially thought. It's hands-on, it's technical, there's problem solving. But is it a solo mission, or are you part of a bigger team in this environment? Oh, teamwork is key in spring making. You're not just off doing your own thing. In fact, if you look at the example profiles of spring makers in the guide, there's a strong emphasis on collaboration and communication skills. You're going to be working side by side with the engineers who design the springs, the quality control folks who make sure everything meets those standards we talked about, and of course, your fellow operators on the production line. It's a team effort.
Sounds like a job where you could really build some camaraderie, working towards a common goal. But what about those who are looking for something a little more specialized? Is there room for that within spring making?
For sure. As you gain experience and expertise, you can definitely specialize. The guide even mentions this master spring maker level, which sounds super cool. You could end up designing custom springs for unique applications. It's like being a spring artisan.
That's amazing. Designing a spring for a race car or maybe even a spaceship. But what about those more interested in moving up the ladder, in terms of career advancement? What does that look like in the world of spring making? I imagine it's not just about becoming faster at making the springs themselves. There must be other paths you can take.
You're right, there are definitely ways to branch out. The guide actually lays out a few possibilities.
Mhm.
Moving up into a management role is a popular choice, becoming a supervisor or something like that. Imagine being in charge of that whole symphony of spring making we talked about, making sure everything runs smoothly.
That's a lot of responsibility,
Hmm.
but it also sounds like you'd have a lot of influence. What about working outside the manufacturing plant itself, though? Are there opportunities that are related to spring making, but not directly on the production line?
Totally. You could become a consultant using all that knowledge you've built up to advise companies on their spring needs. Or if you're feeling really ambitious, the guide even mentions starting your own spring making company.
Wow, talk about being your own boss. From the factory floor to CEO, that's quite a journey. Speaking of which, I know RoleCatcher doesn't just drop all this career info on you and then leave you hanging. They actually provide resources to help with the job hunt itself, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's actually pretty cool. They seem to understand that finding the right job can be as tough as making a perfect spring. They've got a whole section on their website dedicated to tools that can help, including something called AI-powered resume tailoring.
AI, huh? That sounds interesting. What exactly is that?
So let's say you find a job posting for a spring maker and you're really interested, right? You upload your resume to RoleCatcher along with that job description, and their AI analyzes both documents. It figures out how your skills match up with what they're looking for, and then suggests ways you can tweak your resume to help it stand out.
So it's like having your own personal resume writer powered by algorithms.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What about the interview, though? Do they help with that? I feel like for a lot of people, that's the most stressful part of the whole process.
Don't worry, they've got you covered there too. They have this huge database of interview questions that are specific to the spring making field. It's like a sneak peek into the minds of the people who might be interviewing you. By practicing with those questions beforehand, you can walk into that interview feeling way more prepared and confident.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We went from these simple coils of metal to specialized machinery, precise measurements, and even AI-powered resumes. What would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners today? Why should they care about the world of spring making?
I think it's easy to forget about the stuff we take for granted, those springs working quietly in the background, literally holding things together. But as we've seen, there's way more to spring making than you might expect. It's a field with tons of opportunities, and it requires a unique combination of technical know-how, creative problem solving, and good old-fashioned teamwork.
It sounds like if you're looking for a career that's hands-on, challenging, and offers real room for growth, then spring making might be worth checking out. You might just surprise yourself and find that you're really drawn to this field.
Next time you see a spring, take a second to appreciate the skill and precision that went into creating it. You might even think of this deep dive. Hopefully that's not too pretentious.
And hey, if you do decide to take the plunge into the world of spring making, remember, RoleCatcher has all those resources to help you out. From crafting that perfect resume to nailing that interview, they can help you get your foot in the door.
And on that note, I think we've reached the natural unwinding point of this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.